Welcome to Wise Heads, where some of the sharpest minds in business share practical thinking to help you build a better business and make better decisions. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Boyd. Chris is a hugely experienced creative thinker who spent his career working with businesses and brands across New Zealand and internationally, helping them solve problems, sharpen their thinking, and create work that actually makes a difference. And Chris has some pretty strong opinions about where marketing goes wrong, because sometimes the problem isn't the advertising, it's the brief, or the customer experience, or the product, or even the way the problem has been defined in the first place. So today we're going to talk about how businesses can make smarter marketing decisions, waste less money, and increase their chances of doing something that actually works. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Wow, good to be here. Thank you.
Chris, you've spent years working with businesses on all sorts of different problems. When a business comes to someone like you saying, we need to make marketing or we need a campaign, how often is that actually the wrong starting point?
You need to see what the warning signs are, that the problem is actually the product or customer experience or proposition. And obviously, if you're losing customers or if you've got a lot of customer churn, you're seeing a lot of complaints or bad reviews, or your customer services team are getting bad reviews, that company needs to look at their product first before they start doing any marketing. One of the issues is that agencies are designed to solve only one problem. Advertising and marketing alone can't solve the challenges of a lot of businesses.
What do you think businesses consistently make more complicated than it needs to be?
One of the issues when you're writing a brief for a company is people don't agree on what the problem is. And I think sometimes this comes back to what the brief uncovers. The CEO might think you've got a price point issue. Some people think it's the product or service. Some people think it's the brand. That's the complexity, is there's too many voices, too many people with too many different opinions. But that's where I think a good strategist and a good agency can actually help them focus.
To what extent, even in times like we're in right now, is it the responsibility of the agency to challenge a brief when it's clearly not right versus just taking the money while it's there to be given?
You've always got to come from a point of integrity with briefs. You've got to have honesty, because if you don't, it'll show up later on. You'll have to do the creative work again. Or the worst thing is you'll have a campaign which is totally ineffective and it just won't drive sales. It won't get the results if your brief isn't honest and straightforward. And if there's no real truth or insight to it.
Let's talk about the brief. You have a perspective. You're a big advocate for the one-page brief. Why should it only be one page?
What that does is that helps focus everyone's minds on what is really important. All the small agencies and agencies without much creative reputation who weren't that effective always had very confused, muddled 5-page briefs. And so you'd have to have a briefing session to work out what the brief was. And if you're sent off to work on that as a creative team, more often than not, you're just not going to come up with the right ideas. You're going to have to go again. It'll cost the client money. Whereas if you really distill down all the essentials onto a one-page brief, it really focuses everyone to really think about it. What's the challenge? What do we need to solve? If those key lines are buried on the third page in amongst other brand background, it'll get lost.
You've been a creative for a number of years. When you're looking at even a one-page brief, what do your eyes automatically scan and hover on straight out of the gate?
Well, the single-minded proposition, the USP, that's the hardest part. It's the real truth about what you're trying to say. Has the strategist come up with a real truth and insight about the product?
Whose job do you think it should ultimately be to get to that level of clarity in terms of briefing?
Initially, only the business actually knows what it's prepared to give up, what it can genuinely deliver on, and where the truth in the product lies. But your agency should be like a business partner, not just a service-oriented company. And that involves looking at the product and the business. Particularly in this market, agencies will just say, yes, we'll advertise it. Very few of them are going to turn around and have the credibility to say, actually, we think your product's wrong. And then after that, the real insight can often come from creative teams. Definitely, it's got to start with the client because they can tell you what they can and can't do.
You've written that genuinely original creative ideas often require what you call a logical creative leap. What do you mean by that?
Some of the best ad campaigns brought two seemingly unrelated concepts together, and that leap looks illogical from the outside, and it often can get killed in research because it doesn't make sense. That requires human beings with all their emotions and all their ideas and their thoughts and their randomness to bring those two ideas together, which seemingly don't fit. The Sony Bravia rubber balls campaign. I remember seeing it and thinking, well, how did they do that? How did they do it? And it turns out they actually got 250,000 rubber balls and tip them down the streets of San Francisco. Now, there would be no brief that would say, how do we advertise the incredible color range of a Sony Bravia TV using rubber balls? So it would have taken the creative team to have seen some rubber balls somewhere on something and gone, hang on a sec, they look like colored pixels on a screen. That could be a great idea to sell TVs. That is only something that humans can do, and it needs the randomness of people to be able to pull those two ideas together. And they wouldn't have connected before. You never looked at rubber balls and think TVs, let's bring them together. So that's what I'm talking about.
What about when a creative idea comes across as, even with the best intentions in the world, as gimmicky? You think about the Copy No One campaign from Jaguar, which copped a bit of flack for being different for different sake. Kathmandu's Out There campaign with the cat with the laser eyes.
I think particularly the Jaguar one was style over substance. It was just designed to shock. It was designed to tap into a cultural shift at the time in terms of the kind of people you'd place in an ad, the age, the demographics. There was no real idea in there. It was just, how do we create a shocking campaign visually to get people to look at this ad, rather than really talking about what the car is or what it did or what the styling was. You don't come away from it really knowing anything about the car, other than if you're a fashionable person, you might want to buy this car. But all the people in that ad, all the demographics, can't afford a Jaguar. Not only did it not really say anything about the car, but it was also targeting the wrong audience. The people who buy Jaguars are still always going to be 40 to 50-year-olds with a bit of cash who like something that looks a bit more regal. You've always got to have a product truth. I don't know if it's paid off. I don't know if the sales are shooting through the roof or not. But ultimately, it was an idea rooted in style over substance. Kathmandu, it was a nice sounding line that didn't mean anything because it wasn't tied to any unique selling point about the product. I love it as an execution, but I do question whether it was effective at selling outdoor clothes, because it did seem to be appealing to hipsters who generally don't tend to be camping that much or hiking. So I think that's where it can fail.
An illogical creative leap takes bravery. Most businesses are actually designed to do the opposite. They gather evidence, they interrogate the numbers, they minimize the uncertainty, and they try to make rational decisions, particularly when it comes to a creative idea in advertising. How do you, or how does the agency you're working with, convince a rational business to buy an irrational idea?
You've got to have some case studies of where an irrational idea worked and had better results than a play it safe campaign. You've also got to rely on the instincts of the marketing manager, because they can quite often see a good idea.
Can research tell you whether an idea is good or not?
Focus groups can confuse more than they can solve issues. They can end up presenting more questions and a lot of subjectivity. And ultimately, the best creative campaigns always comes down to the instinct of the marketing manager and the creative team. I'm an advocate of testing a USP or a strategy. You can run some cheap social media ads just for the same image, and you can put your different thought over the images, and it's a real campaign and people can buy things. But that way you can quickly test which is the most attractive thought and aspect of the product that consumers respond to. Testing is great at telling you what's working, and it's not so good at telling you what's possible. Tactical decisions can go to evidence. For example, which headline lands, which selling point cuts through, media mix and budget splits. But I think a big creative idea, the tone, the emotional territory your brand plays in, I don't think you can test your way there. Data can pick the best of what you show it, but it can't invent the idea that blows all the other ideas out of the water. It's still craft and judgment. I think testing decides the which, but judgment decides the what.
Is changing behavior ultimately a higher ambition for marketing than simply changing a perception?
You can shift how someone feels about a brand with a beautiful ad, but if it never shows up in what they buy or what they switch to or what they recommend, then you've made something people admire rather than something that genuinely moves the business. So yes, behavior change is harder and a more valuable outcome, but it's usually downstream of getting the perception shift right first, not a replacement for it.
I read on your blog that in 2024, you questioned whether AI would ever be capable of producing seriously original creative work. Here we are 2 years later. Were you right?
As AI enables more businesses to bring marketing and creative in-house, we'll probably begin to see a worse standard of creative. There's going to be a lot of AI slop out there. I don't think it'll replace human beings, because best ideas rely on the insecurities and the emotions and the foibles and all of the thoughts running around inside a human brain to put those two random ideas back together that we spoke about earlier.
To what degree do you think that Joe Public actually cares about AI slop as much as we like to think they do?
I think they care a lot at the moment, actually. There's a lot of data coming in that shows people are turning off if they sense something as AI, particularly with social media advertising. I think they're more interested in seeing a real person filming themselves with a mobile phone, talking about a product that they've used. But I think in time, AI is going to get so good that it's going to be hard to tell whether it's a real person or not. Obviously, you're going to have to label it as AI content. I think if you've got an entertaining enough idea, then people may not care so much. It very much depends on what you want to advertise and how you want to advertise it. If you need a good, authentic product demonstration, then I don't think AI is going to work. If something's humorous and it's a high concept, maybe it doesn't matter so much. To a certain extent, people aren't going to get so used to seeing AI that they may not care about it. It's an ad for a product. I can see that there's a benefit to the product. Who cares? I mean, I saw one the other day for dog beds that was made entirely with AI. If you were into dog beds and you like what that particular dog bed was selling, it was very soft and fluffy and felt like fur. You probably don't care that it's AI. Oh, yeah, it's a good dog bed. I'll buy it.
You describe yourself as much more interested in impact than accolades. So when somebody tells you the campaign performed brilliantly, what's the first question that you ask?
When I came back to New Zealand, I didn't really understand the market too well. And you realize that awards are everything here, everything. But I think that's changing. And in fact, as the industry is shrinking and AI is making it possible for marketing teams to bring that work in-house, our agency is going to have the time and the budget to be so focused on awards. When I look at the awards campaigns, I think to myself, well, first of all, was it real? Did it actually run? Is it for a real product? Did this sell more of the client's stuff? As someone who works with smaller businesses, you already see the impact of that. There are real people in those companies. And did it allow the staff to continue paying their mortgage? Did it allow them to continue paying their kids' school fees and all their uniforms and their bills? When you work for smaller businesses, you really got to be conscious of the impact and feel that sense of responsibility. Have you got statistics and data that you can then provide to your next client and your other client that actually your campaign worked and it actually helped drive sales?
Imagine I'm running a growing business and I'm about to spend a meaningful amount of money on marketing. Before I write a brief, bring somebody in, or commission a campaign, where should I start?
You've got to get honest about what's actually true of your brand right now, not the aspirational version. You've got to talk to real customers and ask why they chose you, why some didn't. What's the one thing that you're genuinely doing better than the competition? You've got to ask if you're trying to grow your category or steal share off another business. And do you actually have the budget to do that? And then what would happen to your sales if you stopped advertising for 6 months? That would tell you how much brand equity you actually have. So if you don't have that, you might need to start working on brand rather than sales for a while. You've got to start off with being really honest about your brand and your business and your product.
After a career spent helping businesses solve problems creatively, if you could remove one piece of unnecessary bullshit from the marketing process tomorrow, what would it be? And what would you put in its place?
I think the main thing is creative direction by committee, where an idea gets watered down by 10 people, each removing 5% of what they personally don't like. It's much better if you have one marketing manager, senior person who can make decisions, who can work with their instincts, that you could talk to about an idea. You've got to be careful about having a row of people who will pick away at ideas.
What do you do when you receive feedback which you know impacts the integrity of the creative idea?
Well, I think you've got to understand a little bit about why you're getting that feedback and where they're coming from. Sometimes that's personal reasons. They're trying to protect their mortgage. They don't want to take risks because they could get sacked. If it doesn't seem like a logical pushback, you've got to work out what's the ulterior motive behind it and try and deal with that in a gentle, loving way with logic and with some data. You've got to judge marketing on evidence and not opinion, but you've got to recognize that evidence measures what already happened and not what's possible. So the best decisions come from testing rigorously, but still trusting judgment enough to back a bold idea before the data can prove it works. And again, that comes from the experience and the instinct of great marketing managers and great CEOs and great internal people within your agency.
What I think comes through really strongly is that better marketing doesn't necessarily start with trying to produce better advertising. Sometimes it starts much earlier, making sure you're solving the right problem. Being clear enough to explain that problem simply, understanding when evidence can give you an answer, and when you need to make the leap that evidence could never make for you. Looking at the experience you're actually giving customers before spending money telling more people about it. And ultimately, being much clearer about what success actually looks like before you even start. Because perhaps one of the biggest opportunities for businesses isn't simply spending more money on marketing. It's making better decisions about where, why, and how they spend it. Chris, thank you so much for your time this week.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. It's been great.